My guest today is the legendary actor Anthony Michael Hall, and he began acting in commercials at the age of 7. And his breakthrough role was as Rusty Griswold in National Lampoon's Vacation alongside Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo. And following the success of Vacation, he entered the defining period of his career, starring in 3 John Hughes classics, 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Weird Science. Then in the 1990s, he starred in Edward Scissorhands with Johnny Depp and portrayed Microsoft chairman Bill Gates in the television movie Pirates of Silicon Valley. Then in the early 2000s, he focused on television work, including an 81-episode run on Stephen King's The Dead Zone, and played the role of Mike Engel in The Dark Knight. Now you can see him in season 3 of Reacher on Apple TV+. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the one and the only Anthony Michael Hall to the show. Welcome.
Hey, Ward, thank you. Nice to be with you today. Appreciate it.
Well, it seems that everyone wants to kick off an interview with you with the 40th anniversary of The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles. So I thought we'd kick it off with one of my favorite shows, Reacher. So how did you get the part of Zachary Beck?
It was offered to me by the show creator, a gentleman named Nick Santora, and it was a really great opportunity. So we had a great meeting via Zoom, like a lot of meetings happen these days, and it was about over a year ago. And he told me that, he had me in mind for this role. I said, that's fantastic, So it was a great opportunity. Went up to Toronto with my family, which I've shot in Canada a lot. And I had fun with that role on Reacher. It was great.
Well, yeah, it was... And I was really surprised to see you because I've followed Reacher since season 1, and I loved season 3. But for you, what was it like working with the 2 big guys, Alan Ritchson and the Dutch giant Olivier Richters?
No big deal. No big deal. No, they were good guys. They're both good guys. Oliver, I liked a lot. I found him to be a really nice guy. He's from Holland, and he's an interesting guy. He was a bodybuilder, and he has his own food company and business. And I think he just set a goal here in his middle age of life to become an actor. So about 5 years ago, he went about the course of, casting for giants, I guess. But he's a great guy, and Alan Richardson's a pretty good guy too. He's all right.
Yeah. Well, how has your career seems to be on a very high trajectory right now with Reacher, and there's Roswell Delirium and a lot of other projects right now, right?
Yeah, well, I have a production company, so it's called Manhattan Films Ward. And what happened was I partnered with Richard Bakewell on this film, and we decided to produce this film together. And I was really intrigued by his writing. I thought he wrote a really interesting, compelling script, really character driven. And as you know, there's a lot of themes in the film. You've been a great proponent of our project, and we really appreciate it. But there's a lot of themes in there, from the aliens to Roswell to a lot of other things that are going on. It's kind of a sci-fi thing in tone. But in reality, at its essence, I think it's really a family drama between the mother and the daughter. And it's really about a young woman kind of reclaiming herself in a way. It starts in the present day, and I play a therapist, Dr. Jerry Baskin, who is helping this young lady whose name is Mayday, played by Ashton Selecki, kind of come to terms with her past and her life with her mother. And she grew up out in the desert, and they were unfortunately victims of some nuclear testing, and then there was fallout, which is the real aspect of their kind of shared hidden past. And then there's a lot of other themes that are kind of get woven into the story, as you saw, Ward. But ultimately, it's really about this woman kind of coming to peace with her relationship with her mother. And the fact is that I think her mother had mental illness and has some issues. So, it's interesting. There's a lot of allegory. There's a lot of kind of symbolic, approach to the filmmaking, which I think Richard did a great job with. But ultimately, it's really about that core relationship between the mother and the daughter.
Yeah. Because as you know, I talked to Rick about this film, and I thought the synergy of the mixture of the storylines in this film flowed from beginning to end so seamlessly. And like you just said, I love the storyline between the mother and the daughter. It really comes out, like you said, a family type situation with this type of film. But some of the parts of this film, it's almost eerie, as some of it's almost like it could really happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think some things, he uses symbology in a way. Some things are representative of other things, but ultimately she had a challenging upbringing. She had a father that was somewhat abusive to the mother, and the mother's kind of dealing with that, and trying to put on a happy face, if you will, but she's suffering, and then ultimately the relationship in the present day is that Ashton, her character, comes to me and she's part of this group therapy session. She's trying to sort all these things out for herself and bring some peace to her life, which is powerful. But in the lead up to that, we have some great performances, as you saw, Ward. We have a really talented group of young actors: Kylie Levine and Ashton Selecki and Ariana Bodenhauser. I can't remember her last name. Forgive me, Ariana.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a really great crew, cast and crew. But we also got some beautiful performances from Dee Wallace Stone and Reginald Vell Johnson. Sam Jones showed up for us. So a lot of great people, like kind of from the '80s period, show up in this. And for me, this is the second film for my production company, so it was really important that once again I aligned with a really talented up and coming filmmaker and a writer director that I respect. And Rick and I have become good friends in the last couple of years since joining forces on this. So it's been a great experience. Um, and I'll tell you, all the kids that, I think they really had lessons for us, Ward, when they got to set. They were all so prepared, so passionate about what they were doing. They showed such joy at work, and they were really great kids to work with. Um, and here I am at 57 now. I mean, I guess everybody in the cast is a kid to me, but all our young actors, from the child actors all the way up to the young women like Ariana and Ashton that I mentioned, are just fantastic in the film. So we're really proud of the movie, and I think it packs a punch. I think it's really interesting and worth a look.
Yeah, Ariana, what an incredible performance she gave. Ashton did too.
Yeah,
Kylie and Caden was a little bit of a scene stealer in this film
yeah.
because her character just makes you cringe and laugh at the same time.
Right, right. And we have these talented young actors, and it's interesting. They were all, when we made the film, they were all around 11 or 12. Now they're in their teens, they're young teenagers. It's been a couple of years, but I was just really impressed with their level of commitment and the passion and the joy that they brought to the set. A lot of times us adults can get too serious in our chosen walks of life, and it was really a pleasure to see them and to kind of be reinvigorated by all of the kids, as opposed to us having advice for them. I think in action they showed us what was really important.
Oh, so you actually learned a lot from the young actors. I was curious as if they came to you for any acting or even business advice.
No, they didn't. They were very well protected. We had a great group of parents that were really there, really supportive for the kids too. So they were on set and they had their own little area. But no, I really did. I learned a lot watching them, and it was just a reminder to value and appreciate the work, and to appreciate it and to approach it with a sense of joy and fun. And I think a lot of times, sadly, those are things that adults can forget.
Well, for you, teaming up with Rick Bakewell on this, how do you go about choosing a script for your company? Was it the whole story that you really fell in love with?
I did. I was really impressed with his writing. And, Rick has an interesting background. He's a cinematographer first, and I thought he had a great technical acumen. He's a really talented guy and a guy that kind of just, went out on his own and did it, became a DP and then a writer director, and just a great guy. He's originally from the Midwest and just a super down to earth good guy, and I really respected Rick, and we've grown to be good friends. So, yeah, I mean, I responded to the material. I thought the script was very interesting, very character driven. It was a small film and it had its challenges too. We shot in and around LA. We shot out in the Salton Sea area, out in the San Fernando Valley, all over. So anytime you have a project, as you know, comes together, it takes a lot. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it takes more than a village to put a movie together. I'll tell you, it takes a
Yeah,
lot of people. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's the reason why I loved Roswell of Delirium because I my two favorite types of films are one character driven films and then
Hmm.
even period pieces. I love period pieces. This one kind of fits both areas because there's an 80s vibe to this film. Did I kind of
Yeah.
bring you back to to the 80s for you?
And it was funny. Yeah, no, that was really fun. I mean, Rick, he did something really interesting. He takes from old commercials, TV shows, a lot of little nuggets and Easter eggs from the '80s that those of us that are old enough to remember will certainly get attuned to. So that was a really smart thing that I thought he did, which was a lot of fun. He also created the world of the kids and their school and their environment and their little group that they have, and I thought that was really cool. And again, really, like I said, gets into the family drama, which is at the core of the film and the essence of it. So he did a
Yeah,
great job.
it is. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a chance to check out Roswell Delirium, this is a film you need to see. I fell in love with it. And again, it's character driven. And I love the story. I'm almost wondering would there ever be a sequel to it?
Hey, you never know. I haven't actually discussed that with Rick, but we'll see. You never know.
Well,
There's
I like
potential
the,
there.
yeah, I love the fact that being character driven, there wasn't this overall heavy focus on the alien side of things. It's there, it has a very strong presence, but like you said, you kept it focused on the whole family dynamic between the mother and daughter, and it just worked perfectly.
I appreciate that word. Yeah, no, it's a testament to Rick. He did a great job, and everybody. We have a great composer who did a beautiful job. All the elements I think came together, and it's cinematic and always whatever the budget range you're working at, the challenge is to put the money on screen and be that with talent, the front, in front and behind the camera, but also just in terms of production value. So Rick had a great sensibility for that. We really wanted to create kind of a small town anywhere look, but then the Salton Sea really gave us another option, another look for the film when she goes out there. And as you said, the theme of the aliens is really interesting. The question that is raised in the film is, was this child abducted? And is that a legitimate experience that she had as through the eyes of her mother? And ultimately, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but, she goes on this exploration, this journey to kind of find out that, there's a lot more at stake than what was on the surface. And in reality, she may have misremembered some things, or she might be dealing with sort of projections of her mother. So that's where it really gets to the core of the film towards the end. But along the way, it's great. It has sci-fi, it has some humor in it. It's some great elements, so we're really proud of it.
Yeah, because you really have that element of bringing in, there's that PTSD element, then there's
Sure.
that element with her mother and trying to figure out what's real and what's not. So it
Right.
really gets the audience to follow along, waiting to see how it's all going to come together and how it ends. So I love the film, and but I've got to ask you because you are the epitome of the 1980s. I mean, there was National Lampoon's Vacation. You had 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, even Weird Science, three of which were John Hughes films. How
Yeah.
did you land the part of Rusty Griswold on Vacation?
Well, you know what happened? I always want to tip my hat to John Hughes. I'm not trying to represent any particular era, but I just happened to have a really wonderful start working for John Hughes. Um, it was incredible because he actually wrote Vacation. I don't know if you know that. He wrote the National Lampoon's Vacation movie, and it was from a short story that he had written, Ward, in National Lampoon's magazine. So for those John Hughes heads, I can just give you a little detail, quick story. So when he was coming up, he was an ad guy. He was writing copy, and that became the premise and the basis for She's Having a Baby with Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth McGovern all those years ago, who were in fact playing John and Nancy Hughes. So it was around that time, Ward, in the late 70s, that John started sending in from Chicago short stories to National Lampoon magazine, a humor magazine. And one of them was Vacation 58, which was written through Rusty Griswold's eyes, actually. So, I feel like it was really a bit of destiny. I'm a man of faith, and I really believe it was kind of written in the stars for me to work with John Hughes. He was the greatest of mentors, the greatest of friends. He was a big brother to me. I love the guy. I really did. And all these years later, where I've never had a director that came anywhere near close to that kind of friendship and that relationship I had with John. It was wonderful. So after I did Vacation, which I did not meet him on, I then was in New York growing up, just being a kid, and I auditioned for 16 Candles, and I got it. And then it led to those two other films, Breakfast Club and Weird Science. So, it was really a blessing of my life to come across John Hughes, and that we blessed each other. He really helped me out and gave me a career. I wouldn't be talking to you here without him. But all these years later, it's incredible. I was in New York with my wife and my son, and I was there celebrating in February the SNL 50th. And then it dawned on me on that trip, Ward, that here I am. I started in 1976, a year later, and I worked for Steve Allen, the late great Steve Allen. Did a play with him when I was 8 years old. So here I am. Next year will be my 50th year. So I guess it is kind of surreal to have movies that are 40 years old plus. I have a handful of them now. Makes me feel like George Burns worked.
Well, it's so funny because when you were talking about National Lampoon's Vacation, and you know
Yeah.
the Marty Moose song. Well,
Yeah.
the Marty Moose song was written by Bruce Bellin, who I had the opportunity to interview, which was really, and he gives the whole funny story how that whole
Oh,
thing
great.
happened because the song had to be written and done within 24 to 48 hours because of the time schedule of the film.
Wow.
And yeah, it was so funny when he told me that story because I'm like, everybody remembers the Marty Moose song, but
Yeah.
why were you and Dana Barron not cast in the Christmas version?
Well, you know what's so funny is it's actually John Hughes's fault, Ward. I was doing Weird Science at the time, and because I had done that run of films with him, the expectation was that I would be in the sequels to the Vacation films. But thank God for John, he scooped me up, and then next thing you know, I made another a trilogy of films with him, which I joke with my parents, Ward. I call it the Puberty on Film trilogy. Very nice. But it was a great way to start. And all these years later, nearly 50, almost 40 something years later, I just tip my hat to John. I wouldn't be here without him. He was such a wonderful guy, Ward. He was really super cool, down to earth, and a fun guy. And truthfully, what he did for me, he did for others. He gave us careers, and the set experience when we were working was really unique and special because it was so relaxed and fun. And his scripts were always great. The scenes were always great. But then he'd let you ad lib and try stuff. And I was like his muse. He would just say, try this or try that. Or I would come up with stuff and he would see, like, yeah, go for that. He was really amazing that way. And he was like that with Molly Ringwald and everybody else on the movies. It was really a testament to his talent that he was never, intimidated by any of that. He could allow things to happen and improvise and cut us loose. And it was great.
Well, that's where the magic of movie making comes in is when a director allows the actors to do a little bit of ad libbing because it comes
Right.
across natural, but then you may have this special moment that just shows up on film that everyone will always remember. Now,
You said it, and I consider that one of his great talents, not just the writing, directing, but that ability to listen and to allow things to happen and to collaborate and to open it up for others. You said it, he really did that. He was really great that way, and then a lot of surprises can come from that, and a lot of other great stuff, which did happen.
well, how would you compare being directed by John Hughes as well as being directed by Tim Burton and even Christopher Nolan?
Well, those are great directors. I mean, I have had the privilege of working with a handful of what I would, and many would call great directors. Certainly, Christopher Nolan. Tim Burton is a great guy too. I just worked with him. I guess I can break this now because it was announced a few weeks back, but I joined the cast of Wednesday. So I went from Reacher in Toronto, and then I flew with my family over to Europe, and we were visiting my mother-in-law. And then from there, I got the call from Tim to join the cast of Wednesday, which was great. And it was funny because I sent him an email when I got to location. I said, "Where's Tim?" They go, "Oh, Tim's editing in the south of France." I went, "Of course he is. He's Tim Burton. That's where he should be." So it was wonderful. I sent him a thank you email and just thanking him. It was great to work with him again. I said, "You didn't have to wait 34 years to hire me again, Tim. I'm around. But he's a great guy, very quiet, very subdued, very interesting guy, certainly a great intellect, but really comes alive when he directs. He really goes into action mode. And Nolan is very kind of the sophisticated English gentleman that people know and see, but also brilliant, very quiet, has a great sense of humor, but it's also different. He's a different style. But those guys actually both are very kind of introverted in some ways. And then when they direct, they really come alive, which is fun to watch.
Well, what is your fondest memory of being on the set of The Breakfast Club?
Oh, the set of the Breakfast Club. I don't know. Let me think. I would just say the laughter, Ward. I would say the laughter because that was like filming a play all those years ago. We were at a school that had been shut down. We were sharing it with the USFL Chicago Blitz team at the time, which was hilarious because we had a football team. We'd be passing in the hallways. They were going out to use the high school track and the football field. And, just a fun experience. But I just remember the laughter. One of the things that John did, Ward, was he carved out time for us to rehearse. So we had about 2 weeks of rehearsal. And that was really great. And then just talking about the characters, reading the scenes, spending the time with each other, bringing things into conversation, seeing how we could refine it and make it better. So that was great. But just the laughter was really what I remember the most because we would really have a laugh on set. And he was cool like that. And he was also famous for letting takes go long. So if we were ad libbing or trying stuff, he would just say, let it roll. And he would often go until the camera rolled out. You'd hear This is back in the day when we had film in cameras, right?
Oh
And you would
yeah.
hear you would hear the film run out. You'd be like, oh shit, we ran through a whole mag. And these are the days where the cameras just had to run back to the truck and get another magazine. They call it a film, So, but just great experiences working with him. He really was wonderful.
One of my favorite films is 16 Candles. Grew up with these films. Do fans get 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink mixed up when they talk to you sometimes?
Oh my God, 98% of the time. It's so funny. Sometimes I'll just let people talk. They're like, I loved you in Pretty in Pink. And I'll go into 10 scenes. I'm like, by the way, I wasn't in that movie. But in fairness, it is kind of the same movie, right? The girl from the wrong side of the tracks, and she's got the dorky guy and the handsome guy, and all that. But look, what John did for us is just wonderful. Ward, as you know, he just created his own kind of subgenre and his own way of doing things back in the 80s when we all started, and it was such a gift, to all of us. He really paved the way for us and gave us careers that, fortunately, some of us still have. So I'm very grateful to him. Yeah, I really am.
Well, you've been in movies with people like, well, besides Chevy Chase, but I mean, you had Johnny Depp, Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman. They're all in The Dark Knight. Of course, Johnny
Hmm.
Depp is Edward Scissorhands. What was it like working with that group of actors?
Great question. Well, on Scissorhands, I always had a lot of respect for Johnny. Even when I was a younger man, I always thought he was a phenomenal actor. He really is a virtuoso actor and can do anything. I think it's incredible. So I had a lot of respect for him. He was actually a very quiet guy too. Another one, very kind of subdued and very cool. And I saw that relationship with he and Tim that John and I had. When I got to the set, they just had this brotherly love and connection and a short speak, if you will. They just had a shorthand with each other that John and I had. And then on the Dark Knight, and I felt bad for Johnny because he'd come to work on Edward Scissorhands all those years ago. Ward, he'd have to get there at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning because he'd have 3 hours of makeup, and he'd have a team of people just getting him in that suit, and then another team of people getting their claws on him. It was amazing. But great guy, couldn't have been nicer. He was great to me. He was really cool. And he knew that I looked up to him, and he was cool. He was a really great actor, great guy to work with. All the cast on that. And then on the Dark Knight, yeah, I mean, I was working with people that I had loved and admired. Gary Oldman, one of our greatest actors alive. He's phenomenal. And then, of course, Christian and Heath. I admire those guys. I still do. I think Christian's great. He's really done some incredible work over the years and has made a lot of really fantastic movies. He's a wonderful actor. And Heath was in his zone, as we see. He was really interesting. I spoke to Chris Nolan about that, and it's interesting because he told me regarding Christian. He said Christian was the first actor I met with for Batman. He goes, he just knew right away. He said when he walked in, he goes, he just knew. And with Heath, I think Heath and Chris had been in prior discussions before production. And interestingly enough, you may have read this, Ward. Some of their influences for the Joker were like Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, believe it or not. And who was the other influence? They thought of Clockwork Orange, Malcolm McDowell's role in that. The idea of the Joker embodying anarchy and not just the villain, but just anarchy in the city. Another interesting note that I learned is that Christopher Nolan grew up in Chicago. He was actually the first couple of years, I think, although his parents were British, they lived in Chicago. So his brother Jonathan Nolan, if you've ever heard him interviewed, he actually kind of sounds American because I think he spent more time here than Chris. But interesting to note that they, as a family, lived in Chicago, which is why he chose Chicago as Gotham. So, but that was a great experience.
Have you ever taken a role and taken it deep, maybe to the edge of what Heath Ledger did for the Joker? I mean, would you ever take a role and go that far with it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a film with Brad Pitt back in 2015 that didn't get released till 2017. It's called War Machine. And I'm very proud of this film for a number of reasons. I have a lot of military people in my family. My grandfather served in World War II. I had an uncle in the Korean War, an uncle in Vietnam. And I'm very passionate about our military, and I'm very patriotic as an American. And so that film was very particular to me. I don't want to give up too much more than that, but on that one, I played it very kind of gung ho. I played a fictional character, but the two, characters that Brad and I were playing were based on real United States military generals, General McChrystal and General Flynn. So it was a very interesting and challenging role for me. And, although I didn't do any sort of impression of the person I was playing, it was important to me to kind of go all in. So on that one, I did sort of, approach it from a method sort of standpoint. And also, when I played Bill Gates years ago, 1999, I think if anything, the thing that can be said about whatever form of method acting any actor might choose is just an idea of, you want to submerge yourself. You really want to get completely vested. It's still important to be a person. You don't want to upset people or tick people off, but you want to just kind of fully commit to the role in ways that are unique and personal to you to kind of really get in the zone, if you will. So yes, to your question, I have a few times, and War Machine was one of them. Very proud of that movie.
Well, is there a particular actor or actress that you would love to work with that you have not had the opportunity to do yet?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot of good ones. I like sharing the screen with Brad. He was great. Johnny Depp's been great. I mean, I've worked with a lot of them. We'll see. I don't know. There's a lot of great actors in the world. It was interesting when I was at SNL. Ward, it had me thinking that because I was such a fan of all the cast over the years, and particularly the women. The women have been so great on that show. So there's a lot of great people from that world that I'd love to work with too. So it was really, I tell you, it was spectacular being a part of that SNL 50th. It was a 2-night event at Radio City concert on February 14th. And then on Sunday night, it was a 3-hour special that everybody saw on television, which is just incredible. I felt like I was at the Oscars or something. I ran into Jack Nicholson and I saw Paul McCartney and all these other people. It was just really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that show has lasted this long?
I can't. It is literally surreal to me, Ward, because when I look back and I think, wow, I was on that show 40 years ago, man. I mean, I was only a kid. I was 17 years old. I was a wee lad, as the Scots would say. I was just a kid, man. But I loved it, and I didn't really break out. I didn't have any hit characters or any of that stuff. But the doing of the show is amazing, I'll tell you. Because I'll tell you what it is, Ward. It's rock and roll, it's theater, it's stand up, everything rolled into one, and the doing of it, the actual execution of just getting a show done in 6 days is something else. So all that energy informs the making of the show in that week that leads up to it. So by the time everybody goes live, they're ready for it, and people don't realize how much work those casts put in. So I was done after a year. I was good.
Well, so would you say that being on SNL for any actor or maybe any stand-up comedian and even a writer improves their overall career and improves their craft?
100%, hands down. There's no way that it couldn't because it's such a pressure cooker, Ward, that it just refines you, makes you better. And I think that's one of the things I've learned over the years in production, making all these movies and TV shows, is that I think people thrive under adversity, whether they're aware of it or not. I think they really do. When they're under the gun, I think something else kicks in, another energy. So yeah, I think to your point, you have a great point there. Yeah.
Well, does Lorne Michaels, does he have a mentorship side to him?
Well, it's interesting. He's known to be a man of a few words. A lot of those comedians that have come off that show are kind of known for, everybody has their Lorne impression. I won't bore you with one, but it's pretty funny. But to be very honest, it's a known fact now that when Mike Myers did those Austin Powers movies that we all loved, they were just hilarious. Doctor Evil was based on Lorne. So there's this kind of like mid-Atlantic thing where he's Canadian, but he sounds a little more British than Canadian. But in terms of the mentorship, that's a good question. I think the way he does that is with just putting you through the system, whether you're a writer in training and you're writing and you're part of the writing team, or if you're an actor and you're in the supporting cast, they're not ready. There's like the main cast and then there's the character, the actors that he's grooming to kind of see if they'll fit fit the place and make the team, so to speak. So I think there is kind of a system built in already with Lorne that he makes you earn it and work for it, and he just
Well,
throws a bunch of 75 kids together and goes, all right, let's go, come up with some comment. But then
well,
there's also the band coming in and there's the rehearsals and there's all the union guy. I mean, it's just such an incredible fun show to work on, man.
yeah, I mean, for you as an actor, what's the greatest advice you've ever received, either from a director or a fellow actor?
I have two lines that belong to Spencer Tracy that are two of my favorites. Spencer Tracy said, hit your mark, look him in the eyes, and tell the truth. Good one on acting, right? Pretty right to the point. And then the other one was also Spencer Tracy. He said, if you want to be an actor, don't get caught doing it.
Well, what is next for Anthony Michael Hall?
Well, we're growing the company. Right now, we're raising money to expand my company, Manhattan Films, and to do more projects. And we have a whole slate of projects in development that we've been working on. And I have a small team of people that I'm working with. So that's the next frontier for me, is to grow out the production company. I want to start directing and producing more projects. And, kind of, I have a great admiration for guys like, let's say, Jason Blum, who found their niche. So I think I would like to produce comedies. I would do some horror. I would do a lot of different stuff, and grow the company. And as an actor, I feel like I'm just getting warmed up. You were kind enough to say that I was defined by the 80s, but that was just the beginning for me. I just started out then, and I thank God for a long run. I really do. I'm thankful to God to have a creative life and to have been doing this as long as I have, coming up on 50 years. I'm just grateful. So I want to be like George Burns. I want to be somewhere in some theater at 95 going, it's good to be anywhere at my age.
It was so funny, Anthony, because I was telling some of my friends, I said, hey, I'm going to be having an interview with Anthony Michael Hall. And I told one of them, I said, he's in Reacher season 3. And they go, that's Anthony Michael Hall? Because they're still thinking you're the kid in the Breakfast Club. They don't realize that you grew up. And I thought it was so funny. And then I was telling my daughter, and she goes, and I said, he was in Edward Scissorhands. And she goes, Edward Scissorhands? Because she's a big Johnny Depp fan. She goes, oh my gosh, he was the jerk in the van. I thought that was so funny because I had to think, funny. I'm like, oh yeah, he played that part with the guy in the van. I'm like, wow, that kind of
crazy.
Took me
Even
by
a movie
surprise.
like that was 1990, if you can believe it. That's crazy. It's wild. The passage of time. Yeah,
amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much for all of your time today and sharing some of your past roles and what's coming up for the future for you. And so you filmed the episodes with Wednesday. You got something else coming in after that?
That's what's coming right now. Wednesday's the next thing on the docket. And obviously Roswell Delirium is streaming on Amazon and Apple. So people can go check that out. And if you haven't caught up on Reacher, check out season 3 of Reacher. Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can see Anthony Michael Hall and Reacher on Apple TV Plus. And if you haven't seen Reacher, you've got to start with season 1. It's all about character building, or I should say character development. And don't forget to catch director Rick Bakewell's sci-fi thriller, Roswell Delirium, as you will not only see Anthony Michael Hall, but some of your favorite 80s actors are in it as well. But it's a great movie, a great story. And just like Anthony said, it is streaming right now on Apple. And so check that out. And again, I want to thank you, Anthony, for sharing your career with me today. And ladies and gentlemen, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show as well as our YouTube channel. And you can listen to us on your way to work on Spotify and many other channels. And as for me, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.
Tensions between the Soviet Union and U.S. remain at an all-time high.
We're under attack?
What is happening? Come on. Go, 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 go.
Hey, good morning. Come on, join me.
All right. Who wants to tell me what today is?
It's the 2-year anniversary of the attack.
I was scared. Everybody was.
Was that the first and only time you've been abducted?
I don't know exactly. It might not even be the first time I was taken. I don't think there's anything there I want to remember.
Overnight, she started developing alarming levels of radiation exposure.
So she's dying.
See?
Ma'am?
Now, your mind should be in a world of nothingness, drifting, calling home. What do you see?